Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome. I'm trying to do this in two places at once. So it's slightly awkward. I'm going to speak this direction, and I apologize this direction that mostly you're going to get my side view here. But I want to say welcome from wherever you are in the world. Where I am, it's almost noon on Friday, April 8th. Sunny day here in Northern California. So hello, welcome from wherever you are. Morning, afternoon, evening, joining live, watching the replay. And I had an experience last weekend, actually, which was the impetus for this. And I'm just now getting to this piece. There's an element, so we actually used to teach this with a colleague of mine named Michael Porcelli, and we created and taught a program together called the Authentic Relating Comprehensive. And there were lots of pieces of that, but one piece that we talked about was actually the importance in any relational dynamic, any relationship, if you will. And so that could be a friendship, it could be a romantic relationship, it could be a colleague, but the importance of actually knowing, like, what are you doing? Why is this relationship for? And the experience that I had last weekend was my partner and I, essentially, we were doing yard work together. We were working in the garden. We were building, and creating things on our property together. So you could just call it sort of like, I don't know, yard maintenance, and at the surface level, it looked like building these things or putting these plants here. But I could feel, and he had hired a worker, so they were doing, like, they were putting posts in with cement and sort of building a pergola, and I was putting earth in a garden box that he had built, and I was moving and replanting a bunch of plants, and so we weren't necessarily always working together, but I could really feel the way that there was like a syncing up between us in doing it was almost like tandem play, like toddlers do this tandem play thing. And they're playing near each other, but not necessarily together. And I could actually feel that there was something like that happening between my partner and I that was really important. Like, I could actually feel the connection of our beings or our nervous systems, and like the way that the weave of our relationship was being strengthened by us doing this shared work, not necessarily always together working on the same project, but near each other, and that we had a shared focus. So sometimes we might be here and he's doing, and this also has value. I'm not negating the value of this, but he might be doing, work on the property, and I'm doing, like, cleaning of the house, or there's something, and that has this other way of tending to our family and our life. But there was something in particular about both working in the same way, in a way towards not the exact same goal, right? He might be building a pergola and I might be replanting these plants, but there was a shared purpose of this space that we were in together, that we were working on together. And we would occasionally sort of tap each other and say, hey, what do you think about this? Or, hey, would you stop for a minute and take a look at this? And so even though he could do that whole thing alone and I could do this whole thing alone, I could just feel the way that those threads of our relationship were being woven together and strengthened by doing this kind of work we were doing together. And it reminded me of what I said at the beginning here about this piece that we used to teach in the Authentic Relating Comprehensive around taking time, putting attention on bringing some conscious awareness to why are we together at all? Like, what is actually, or creating, right? Maybe it's describing and naming, Like, why are we together at all? Maybe it's actually creating, we could call it a shared purpose. There's something about whatever this is that I'm wanting to describe. I don't fully have the words for it. That's sort of more than just our shared purpose or our shared values. But they are connected to those things. And those pieces are threads of what I'm talking about. And I don't think it has to be that we're always doing that, but again, being somewhat intentional about making sure that we do spend time on these things that are shared. And the way that I felt it, and this is where it connects to purpose, it connects to the why, it connects to shared values, because the way that I felt it being together, working on our property together, was less like, here we are building a home together. And I was like, oh, we are loving this land. We're both loving it. And we're loving it together. And it really struck me how I want to say it's self-centered, but it's something akin to self-centered that's slightly different. Most of the conversation around relationship is, and it starts with like, do they love me? And are they loving me the way I want to be, and the way I want to be loved? And do they love me enough? And do they want me? And am I getting what I want, need, and desire in this relationship, right? So that's like the very clear self-centered. But even what widens out is often like, how can I love them better? And, do we love each other? And are we, there's something that's like self-centered about the relationship itself that most relational work is focused on, right? How do we love each other better? And what are the practices we bring to each other? Maybe it's just that it's very like human centric, but there's something still that's very like me and you. And here we're trying to work this thing out together. And what I felt was this way of that it was almost like he and I are then side by side and we're loving something together. And the attention isn't so, it's not just me focused or just you focused, or even like, looking at each other, right, face to face, that sort of intense eye gazy thing of like us. But that we could be side by side, like bringing our love forward together on something else that I don't think is addressed consciously or explicitly very often. So in certain parts of the culture, such as they are, I would say this is talked about as like staying together for the kids, or some unconscious, unspoken assumption that we're together to create a family. We sort of like, and there are these clear steps that certain, parts of the over culture, it's sort of like we get together and then we move in together, and that, or maybe we get married and then we move in together and then we have a kid, and that's like what we're doing. But it's not often questioned, or then when it's questioned, it often falls into this category of like, well, how do I love you, or how do I get the love I want? It becomes again this somewhat self-centered relational view. And what I really want to invite all of us, including myself, it's like, right, but is to inquire into, and not just our intimate relationships, but again, it's sort of this realm of like, I made I don't know what I called it because I couldn't find it the other day, I think, but I did a piece many years ago called like Why Love Isn't Enough. And I think this is part of it. It's not just like, do you love me enough? And do I love you enough? And like, are we loving each other enough? It's what are we loving together? Why would we be, walking through this life together? Like, yes, loving each other, but what are we loving together? What are we bringing our lives together in order to do, create, or love more? And that there's actually something very important about this, and important about addressing it consciously. Because again, I don't believe that people should get divorced willy-nilly necessarily, or and that there isn't any value in whatever we say is, quote, for the children. But I don't inherently believe that staying together is better for the children. So that's one of the ways this can get played out unconsciously. Or it's one of the ways that I do think that couples, and I want to take this out of the realm of just intimate relationship, romantic relationship, couplehood in just a moment. But it is one of the ways that this plays out is like, suddenly when we don't have the kids, the kids aren't at home anymore, and we look at each other and go like, who the fuck are you? What are we doing? Or I've heard people talk about, I don't have this in my family, maybe because nobody has like that much money in my family, but I've heard people talk about that, that there's constant remodeling happening, that it's just ongoing, right? As soon as this room's remodeled, and they just did the kitchen 2 years ago, but they're doing it again. And I think that is an unconscious search for like, what can we do together? Because we don't know what we're doing together anymore. And so I think that the deeper cut is, right, not as like, what is our purpose? I think it's valuable to go like, what is our why? Like, why are we together? But there's something about asking this question, what are we loving together, that helps us bring that into conscious awareness in a way that the answer is maybe a little less heavy-handed, right? It's a little more like delightful. Well, what are we loving together? And if I'm not sure, well, what do we want to love together? So what can I describe? And just the way that I could feel again with my partner, like, oh, we're loving as a verb, something more than just me and him and us. It's not just about us loving each other. There's actually, the reason we would be together is so that we can love something together. And how much deeper I could feel our connection in that than sometimes when I get a little more focused on like, am I getting loved? Am I loving him well enough? Something like that. I think there's also, there is a realm to bring this into our platonic relationships and our friendships. And there may not always be like a purpose, but that there is something about what does our friendship do? Or what do we love together? And how do we, not like how do we show it, like, I don't know, like something moralistic, but again, to hold it as a verb, as though our relating is alive, and that our relationship might have actual movement, life, or momentum, and holding loving itself, right, as a verb. And so there's ways that we do that and show that and live it in a moving, living, breathing way. So, and then I think that it's something that can actually infuse our working relationships with a lot of life. So it might be more obvious sometimes, this question. We don't think about it usually with colleagues as like, what are we loving together? We think like, well, what is our purpose? And well, we're here to do this job together. And so sometimes there's more of this in colleague work and professional relationships, but it's a little less conscious and maybe a little more on the surface rather than at the deeper level. You may or may not be in like a company where that's an appropriate question to ask. I don't know, but to ask it yourself, right? Like, how do we do this together? That it in some way is an act of love. I believe that can be there actually, no matter what kind of work we're doing. It might in some ways also be this piece I've talked about before, which is, right, our purpose is really what we do, or like who we are, like while we do whatever we're doing. And I have found that in very large corporation, global corporations that I've worked for before. And I've certainly found it in my own work now. And I've found it in collaborations with colleagues. And it's also been absent, right? Even in what seem like very meaningful collaborations with colleagues. And so to bring this as a little bit more of a conscious, aware inquiry in our own lives, like, well, what are we loving together? And it can still be, I mean, my partner and I are also raising children, and that is one of the things we're doing, but to let it be conscious and on purpose. Oh, we're raising these children together, and this is how we do it. There can be that divide and conquer, which is useful, frankly, with the what do we call this? The nuclear family model that we have. That's it's a total shit show. But it can certainly. But there are also these times again, and I think there's something important about turning towards each other again, whether we're talking about intimate and romantic relationship. But there's also something really important about sitting or standing or walking side by side and and creating in that way, like a side by side togetherness. That's as much as a tidy bow as I have on this one. I'm going to just check this comment. It says, love what you're saying, Kendra. Creating beyond the relationship, generating energy together creates a third or higher purpose. Important work on the planet, in my opinion, has a big energetic influence. Yeah, I feel that too. And I don't want to get like sort of moralistic or high grounded about it, but the reason I wanted to say something, and the reason that I'm sort of like fumbling through, even though this isn't, I don't have my bullet points and this isn't maybe the most cogent live I've ever done. But I felt it. I felt it while I was, sweating away in my moving plants and moving big bags of dirt and with my partner in his building. And it's like I could feel that energy into the world. And some of that is absolutely created in the ways we love each other on purpose. But I could actually feel the way that it was like wider and freer in this side by side loving something together. And that house projects can be like that, and raising children can be like that, and creating community can be like that. All of these things can be approached that way. They can be done consciously or unconsciously. I mean, again, it was like we were doing yard projects, but it was like I could also feel it was like we're actually loving the land together. And this is where I would say the thread probably does drop down into like, what are our quote unquote values? I don't know what else more I have to say about that. So maybe I'll just stop right there. Thank you. Thank you for joining me, whether it was live or in the replay. Thank you for any way that this drops in and encourages like more conscious and authentic relating with our colleagues, relating with our friends, relating with our lovers and intimate partners, relating with our co-parents. I think it's different with children. It's actually, I mean, I hope this inspires more authentic and conscious relating with our children, but I actually don't hold the view so much that our children chose us. I don't know that that's not true, but it doesn't always seem fair to be like that we're inviting them onto some kind of like, actually we brought them in and we're responsible. So it feels a little different there, but I'm definitely here for more conscious and intentional relating with our children as well. So that was a weird little bag of worms to open at the very end. So the inquiry again is like, what are we really loving together, and how can that support our relationships? All right. Hoping you have a wonderful rest of your day or evening, depending on where you are in space and time. Ciao. Let's see. I don't know how